Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Greece for Reason to Resist on August 1st, 2025. Today, we're very pleased to be joined again by geopolitical analyst extraordinaire, Laith Marouf. Laith is the executive producer of Free Palestine TV and is based in Beirut, Lebanon. As Reason to Resist recently reported, Laith was seized and detained by Lebanese military intelligence last month. He spent 2 nights, according to our information, in 2 different jail cells and was subjected to rather uncomfortable questioning after many of his supporters contacted the Canadian embassy in Lebanon and demanded that the embassy secure his release. Laith was freed from detention. And it's my understanding that this is Laith's first interview since he emerged from the jail cells of Lebanese military intelligence. We're most grateful for the opportunity to speak with him. Welcome back, Laith.
Well, it's great to be with you, Dimitri. I would like to thank you for taking the time when I was in there to inform the world of what was happening to me. You're a great friend and definitely a honorable supporter of journalists' rights and human rights in general. This is your history, and it showed your priority when you did this coverage of my detention. It showed your integrity and your understanding of the priorities that are there.
Much appreciated, Laith. And I know I'm confident that I speak for the audience members of this program when I say that we were all relieved to hear that you were okay and back on the job. And by all indications, you're more motivated than ever. So I'd like to get into it by asking you about what happened from your perspective. And why don't we start with the conditions under which you were seized? Where were you? And what happened at that moment when you were taken into custody?
Well, the first thing I would like to say is that although my detention was unique, it was something that hasn't happened in Lebanon since the end of the civil war in 1990. I was the longest held journalist now in Lebanese history since 1990. Even all of those things, it's important to remember that journalists are being targeted all around the world currently, specifically on the issue of Palestine. We saw what happened to Richard Medhurst. We saw what happened to Craig Murray. We saw what just happened to the reporter of RT when they went to London, also to their home just last week. And of course, there's Georges Abdallah that was just released from 41 years of prison in France. And 20 somewhat of those years were in violation of the orders of the Supreme Court of France. So the targeting of journalists and the abuse of journalists and the abuse of laws and detentions and so forth of human beings is not unique to Lebanon. And definitely Lebanon is not the worst place on the planet for these violations. I say all of this because I was not physically abused while I was in my detention, and I came out alive and with my dignity, and therefore I want to make sure that when we talk about this, this does not become something about targeting Lebanon for its mistakes. I also want to say that I received an apology from the intelligence of Lebanon, and that what I was told is that individual officers that were involved in this made mistakes. They will be sanctioned for those mistakes, and Lebanon is going to be learning from this to correct its behavior here. So those are all things that we wouldn't have heard from intelligence agencies in France or the United States. And of course, above and beyond all of this, we have the Zionist colony who killed 200, almost 40 journalists since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza. This is above and beyond those who are being tortured and abused. So I think my story is insignificant when we put it in those contexts of what's happening inside Palestine, what's happening in the West, and the fact that I am here. I want to say one last thing about this issue, and I hope we can move from it after, is that right now I have authorization from the intelligence and from the military of Lebanon to be reporting from every spot in Lebanon. So in a way, that pound of flesh that I gave, gave me now the right to, cover every inch of this country. If I only knew that it required this 1 pound of flesh, I would have given it a long time ago.
Before you continue, Laith, that's wonderful news. It really is. My hat is off to the Lebanese military intelligence, because, as you said, this is pretty much unthinkable in any Western country today, certainly in the case of the genocidal entity, Israel. I mean, they don't apologize even for the mass murder of journalists, let alone for what was done to you. So and the other comment I want to make is that, in my experience in Lebanon, I've actually discussed this with other Lebanese journalists, I was always impressed with the degree of press freedom in the country. The degree to which people can say things, for example, openly support resistance groups, criticize resistance groups, condemn their own government, condemn foreign governments, is really quite impressive, always has been in my experience relative to what you see today in the West and in obviously other parts of the world. So I'm glad to hear that Lebanon appears to be determined to preserve, despite all the pressures being placed upon it, a very significant and healthy degree of press freedom. So with that,
it's great that you mentioned this, honestly, because this is something that I had as a discussion with the intelligence here leadership after I was invited to their offices for that apology and the permits. Lebanon, you can find a TV station, a radio station, a newspaper of whatever position you have. You can curse every prophet and every religion and every state and every leadership as you wish. And definitely, honestly, after going around the world for decades, just like you, Dimitri, and visiting and working on these issues, specifically media rights, I, without a doubt, can say that Lebanon is the most free country in the world in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of the media. And this is not an exaggeration. This is not because I was treated correctly after my exit from those. And this is because I worked in licensing and policies and laws of broadcasting and media in many countries. And I have never seen this. In fact, in Canada, we know, me and you, that there's only one color of media, all pro-Israel, all pro-Zionist. We know that myself being a specialist in these issues and an analyst and a war correspondent, haven't had any media space. You'd think one media outlet would have called me over the years, but that shows you, of course. And so, nothing is perfect. The world is not perfect. We need to better things as we go, but definitely Lebanon is at the forefront of freedom of speech and freedom of the media.
Yeah, you mentioned your expertise. I omitted to refer at the outset when I introduced you to the fact that in Canada, you were an expert in broadcasting regulation. And in fact, it was in that capacity where you were constantly advocating for marginalized voices in this corrupt corporate media that we have in Canada, where you basically had quite a tussle with the Canadian government and Zionist groups, shall we say. So we can we've gotten into that on prior occasions. We don't need to repeat all of that history here. But in light of these developments, Laith, the fact that the Lebanese military intelligence admirably has apologized. I mean, I'm happy for you, and I invite you to tell us, at least in broad strokes, what happened to you. Maybe you don't want to get into the every detail now that it's turned out this way, but I think that our audience would nonetheless be quite interested to know what you experienced.
Yeah, I mean, briefly speaking, we were out to film night attacks by the Zionists. We very rarely do night coverage because it's so dangerous. But the Zionists were deliberately attacking all these frontline villages in Lebanon over the night, and we wanted to bear witness to that and bring that to our audience. So we went to Mace al-Jabal, which is right on the border with occupied Palestine, and it's kind of in a peninsula of Lebanese territory. So it's from three sides, kind of surrounded by Israeli military posts. And as we were arriving, we were stopped at the entrance of the village by youth on motorbikes, scooters. And then the police officer of the village was called in, and we were taken to the village by the police officer, had to follow his car. And at some point, he called the military intelligence. What I know now is that actually, at some point, the Israeli military had contacted the UNIFIL and the Lebanese intelligence and police, informing them of our arrival to the village. So now we know this. I didn't know this before, but the Israelis had their eye on us, and they were threatening to attack us. This is what we were informed just over the last 24 hours. So, our life was in threat, under threat. It was always under threat by the Zionists. But this is the first time we know that UNIFIL and Lebanese military were contacted about us specifically. And I think this in somehow may have triggered this moment of unsureness on the ground by the local police officer who insisted that the military intelligence takes me for questioning. And so that's kind of how now we know a little bit about how the whole ordeal started. And, I was questioned in Tibnin military intelligence barracks.
Where's Tibnin?
Tibnin is just like around half hour from Mace al-Jabal. It's also in the south of Lebanon. It's also south of the Litani. Mm-hmm. It's more to the central sector of the border than where Mace al-Jabal is all the way in the east. Mm-hmm. And eventually I was taken to the military barracks in Saida or Saidon, and spent the night there, also questioned there, and in the morning taken to the headquarters of the military intelligence just outside Beirut on the highway to Damascus. And that's where I spent another night of questioning. And, my devices were opened. They asked me for the passwords. I gave them. I have nothing to hide. And in a way, I think about, I have for a while thought about buying more secure devices that you can't open. But that would have worked with the maybe Canadian intelligence. But who knows also? Look at what's happening to people that are being stopped with devices and they're refusing to open them in the United States, Canada, and the UK. They're ended up being charged for refusing to cooperate with the authorities. So, it seems like there's no way around opening your device. And they went through all my contacts, specifically those inside occupied Palestine, the tens of youth that I trained over the decades, either through Radio Free Palestine and Under the Olive Tree, the radio show that I hosted for more than a decade in Canada, and or those who we trained and worked with us for Free Palestine TV since the beginning of the Al-Aqsa flood. And of all of those, there was one one Israeli name, and that was Gidon Levy.
In your list of contacts.
Yes.
This is the famous, world famous Haaretz columnist.
Yes. And, I had invited Gidon Levy to Canada in 2003 at the buildup of the attack on Iraq. And I had toured him in 6 cities. At the time, I worked as the chapters coordinator for the Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights, which was the main student group on Canadian campuses working on the file of Palestine. And that was my last contact with Gidon. He was part of the Jewish voices that we would bring to the campuses to speak about what Israel is doing, because up until now, it seems like those Jewish voices are more palatable to the Canadian or American audiences. It's another indicator of how Jewish supremacy is inside the minds of Canadians, even if they are critical of Israel. So that was, 22 years ago. Today, I wouldn't invite Gidon Levy, not because I don't like him or something. It's just because we have plenty of Palestinian voices that can speak to these things, and the audience in the West has changed. They are more accepting of taking the word of Palestinian and Arab than they used to.
Yes. I have to say, over time, it took me a while to come to this conclusion, but I firmly believe, and have for some time, that this is a movement that must be led by Palestinians. And our role as non-Palestinians, of which I am one, is to support them in every way that we can. And they should be the face and the voice of this movement. And, our job is to exhibit solidarity. So I'm completely with you there, Laith. I'm very curious to know, first of all, just for purposes of entertainment, I understand that you made one phone call. You were afforded the opportunity to do that after you spending 2 nights in jail, and your choice was rather surprising to your captors. What happened? Could you explain that?
Yeah. I mean, I was pulled out of the cell and made to put on my clothes, which was like, okay, what is happening here? And then I was blindfolded and taken to the interrogation room again. And the interrogator said the Canadian Consul General is coming to see me, and that I have a call now to make. And at that point, I've been thinking already for 2 nights about the poor cats in the house. They're very lovely cats, and even if they weren't, my heart was aching for them. They're the cats of my daughters, and my kids and wife are traveling in Canada, visiting my family. So I said I told the interrogator that the cats in my house haven't been fed for 2 days, and I need to call the doorman to get the keys from the apartment owner and feed the cats. And the interrogator was like, you really want to waste your call on cats? You don't want to call a lawyer or something like that? And I said, I don't want the life of these cats to hang on my neck, and the afterlife, especially, just because of this situation. So he freaked out, but he got the number anyways from my phone, and I called the doorman. And as I was making this call, honest to God, okay, And I'm telling the doorman, go get the keys and feed the cats. I thought in my head, oh shit, this sounds like I'm giving code to somebody. You get the keys and feed the cats. I was like, oh shit, did I just make it worse? Because and luckily, obviously, they probably did watch the guy go open the door and feed the cats. So they but after the fact, I was like, oh man, I didn't calculate those things in my head that this could sound like code.
Man, I hope those cats appreciate you. Hard to imagine a better comrade than you, a cat comrade. So the other thing I want to just touch on here, because one of the very interesting parts of this story is that you have this cantankerous relationship with the Canadian government, not because you did anything wrong, but just because they capitulate all the time to Zionist pressure, and you've driven the Zionist organizations in Canada completely batty. So it was one of the most surprising aspects of this story is the Canadian Consul General. The Consul General shows up. And why don't you tell us exactly what happened there, if you can? That was a rather interesting interaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely driving the Zionists crazy. And I saw that, that article in the, shit-stained white rag. We don't want to call it yellow rag because that's a racist thing that they used to say about Chinese journalists and Chinese newspapers. So it's really a shit-stained white rag, the National Post. And what was kind of made me feel good is I looked at how many people were interacting with this article, or how many views it received. And it received less views than the worst tweet that I would post on X, the least traffic. So it shows you how desperate they are as Zionists in Canadian mediascape, and how ineffective they are in reaching or changing the minds of the Canadian public. They're speaking in an echo chamber right now, the Zionists, and they can't even realize that. I get taken from the interrogation room to a fancy room with couches and TV, and the Consul General arrives with one of her assistants and military intelligence, external relations, executive stays with us in the room. And that's when, the Consul General, she introduced herself. She said she doesn't know me personally, but she'd like to tell me that there's hundreds of emails and calls that were received at the embassy about my situation, and that there's thousands of social media posts all calling for my freedom. Then she asked me if I've been fed well, and I said, what do you expect the food here to be? And then she asked if I received a call, was given a call, and I said I wasted my call on the cats because they needed to be fed. That's when I informed her my my wife and kids are in Montreal. So she offered to contact my wife and kids, and they took the number and they asked for the name of my wife, and I gave the name of my wife, and that's when they got shocked because they hadn't put 1 + 1 together. And as you informed your audience, my wife is the highest ranking Canadian in the academic scene here in Lebanon. She's a chair of the journalism and communications department at the Lebanese American University. And she was honored by the embassy, in fact, in the home of that Consul General, dinner honor for my wife, which I didn't go to at the time to kind of keep things separate and not mix the pots. But now the pots are mixed.
So, well, it was a wise decision while it lasted.
Yes. Oh my God! So yeah, this is how it happened. And once the military intelligence guy heard all of these details in front of him, he decided that I was going to be released then, and that was the end of the story.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Laith. And yeah, again, we're very happy to see you here. And I want to just send appreciation, and I'm sure I've no doubt you share the sentiment to all the people who watched our interviews about this and who contacted the Canadian embassy or who urged them to release Laith and the Lebanese authorities on social media. Thank you very much.
Thousands of people. Your efforts, Dimitri, and the efforts of other media personalities and journalists like you, along with all the audience that watches this, and all our followers of Free Palestine TV, those interventions, those public statements, all sped up the conclusion, number one, that the military intelligence came to, and of course the movement of the Canadian embassy. And so I want to thank everyone. I can't name you all, but everyone that ever wrote a statement, sent an email, made a call, published anything to defend me and my rights. This communal effort is what got me out of this situation. And this is also an indication of what we can all do together. If we are organized, we can do miracles. Us being isolated alone, all of these great humanists, human spirits that are out there, need to concentrate, to work together, to have a movement really to achieve our progressive goals and betterment of humanity.
I have to add one note here because the last observation is so important, Laith. I was on Jamal Thomas's show last week, and we were having a debate about how much these monsters who rule us care about public opinion. And my position, which I think Jamal kind of came around and embraced, was that if they didn't care about our opinions, they wouldn't invest so much time and energy in controlling the narrative, manipulating us, silencing dissent. And they understand perfectly well that if enough people grasp the reality of what they're doing and act collectively, they're finished. It's over. It's over for this psychopathic elite that is carrying out this Holocaust in Gaza. That's why they invest so much money, time, and energy in manipulating public opinion. And I think it really people to grasp that they do care about what you think, but they don't act on it because not enough people know the truth and have come together to act collectively to bring this injustice to an end.
You see, there's two parts to what you said there, and I think we have achieved the first part, which is mass knowledge about, let's say, this file of Palestine. They've lost the propaganda war. All the mass media of the West cannot compete with the tsunami of public sentiments that are on social media, and cannot compete with the citizen media that's on the ground and the independent media on the ground that's covering the genocide and or the wars here in the region. So that's done. What they're scared about, and I think this is partially why, for instance, I was targeted, is calling people into action. It's one thing, right now we have a mass of people that have reached a critical point of knowledge of the issue, but up until now, there's no one directing them into an action to manifest that knowledge, bring it into reality. And so we saw how Palestine Action in the UK has been targeted specifically because it was offering the now knowledgeable public a path forward to challenge the undemocratic actions of their own government, let alone their genocidal actions of their own government. So we have now a duty, not only us, but anyone that claims that they are leaders in movement, to provide this now saturated audience with a path forward for that change. And this, if we do this, I think the liberation of Palestine will be much faster than anyone can think.
You know, there are multiple signs, in my view, that the leadership of Western countries are feeling the heat. One of them is what they did to Palestine Action. But another one that I wanted to talk to you about today was all these theatrics around the recognition of the state of Palestine. We've had three major, middling, I guess, Western powers. They're not nearly in the same category as the United States, but France, Britain, and Canada make statements to the effect that they either will or may recognize the state of Palestine. And before I ask you to weigh in on this, as I understand it, Macron, who was the first one to come out of the gate to the French president, seemed to say that in September, his government will recognize the state of Palestine, and he didn't seem to attach any conditions to it. Then you get Starmer, who, I mean, I'm going to leave it to you to comment upon this, but I was flabbergasted. He basically said, if, the Israelis don't sufficiently improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza by September, then we will recognize the state of Palestine. The obvious implication being that if they meet some low threshold for improving the humanitarian situation, the UK will continue to go against the massive international consensus in favor of the recognition of the state of Palestine. I think it's over 140 states of something like 193 states already recognize the state of Palestine. And of course, the vast majority of them come from the non-Western world, and they represent the vast majority of the human population. So that was Starmer's approach. And then we get third, Carney. The Canadian government always needs cover from other Western governments. One example I'm often given about how the Canadian government can be principled in international affairs was during the lead up to the Iraq War, when there was pressure on the Canadian government, then led by Liberal Jean Chrétien, to take part in the so-called coalition of the willing. And he refused to do that, although behind the scenes he later did actually provide support for the criminal invasion of Iraq, but he officially refused. He did that in a context where the French and the Germans had already made it very clear that they didn't want to participate in that travesty. So Canada's always, third place, always looking for cover from other Western governments, and that happened again here. And Carney's message was also conditional, although his conditions were not related to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. It was around, there being democratic reform in Palestine. And he seemed to suggest that the legitimate leader of the Palestinian people, from his perspective, was Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority. And he wanted to see Mahmoud Abbas become more democratic. And also, I think he said that Hamas had to lay down its weapons and effectively surrender. So his was also highly conditional. So my question to you is, and I invite you to comment on the conditions. I think that's an important aspect of this story. But what do you make just of the fact that they're talking now about the recognition of Palestine? In your view, is this meaningful? Is this what the doctor ordered, considering the monstrosities that we are witnessing on a daily basis in the Gaza Strip?
Well, it's clear that the Western governments are reeling from the pressure on them, and they need to look like they are trying to do something, while in reality they're not. They're going to continue arming the Zionist colony. As we see, Canada, there was a report that just came out yesterday, is lying to its own parliament, is lying to its own population, is continuing to arm the Zionist colony. So I would put all of this in the category of distraction and false hopes that are meant to drag away efforts and people's attention and manpower and hours and so forth into debating this issue. Like, while the genocide is happening and the mass starvation is setting, now we're being distracted to talk about the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of these offers and so forth, when, doesn't matter anymore. Talk is cheap, right? And what's important is looking at the actions of these states, and the actions of these states didn't change. They are 100% behind the genocide of the Palestinian people. And Carney and Macron and Starmer are all guilty of not only aiding and abetting, but engaging in the genocide. And the day will come that they will all be put on trial, and then eventually, after being found guilty, be hung, just as happened in Nuremberg. And we will, this is the only future path in front of us. Now, this also comes at the same time as the Saudis and the Turks and the Qataris have just convened this two-state conference and have said the same things as these Western leaders. They're calling for the disarmament of Hamas, the dissolvement of Hamas as a party, and the creation of an unarmed state of Palestine, which is really going to be a reservation, or like in Canada for the indigenous people, and or Bantustan, as happened in South Africa. And these are all delusions. There will be no Palestinian that will put down their weapons, especially now with this outright genocide going on for 23 months almost now. And so this is all, hot air and just taking away media attention and giving these delusions that there's a possibility for an out. And ultimately, we saw all the way from 1992 with the Oslo process and or the Arab League proposition after the exit of Israel, defeat of Israel in 2000 in Lebanon, that offers a two-state solution on the 1967 borders. That was close to 30 years ago, right? And so that didn't happen then, when Gaza still existed as a place, when the Palestinians were genocided incrementally, not in mass as is happening. So to go back to something that was offered 30 years ago and didn't come to effect because the Zionists and the Americans and the West behind them didn't want to deliver on it, that shows you, of course, that it's not going to happen. And this is a waste of time. And the only solution is a liberated Palestine with no Zionism, and the exit of the West from attempting to recolonize the Arabic world, an exit from 100 years of destruction of Arabic society. And we're heading towards there. There's nothing that's going to stop this war. Let me be very clear. This war is not going to be stopped anyway, but with the total defeat of one of the combatant sides. Either there is no more Palestinians and or there is no more Israel. There's no third solution. Everything else is a distraction.
Yeah. I first let me say, Laith, I'm speechless really at the idea that the victims of a genocide are being called upon to disarm, to surrender their light weapons, whereas the perpetrator of the genocide is not only permitted, but is enabled to maintain a massively destructive military arsenal. If you have just a minimal sense of decency, the party upon whom you should make this demand of demilitarization should be Israel. not the resistance, not the Palestinian people, whose weapons are vastly inferior. Although their courage is much greater, their weapons are vastly inferior to those of Israel. You should be demanding that Israel be demilitarized and then that it be dismantled altogether as a state. But they're calling instead upon the victims of the genocide to disarm. I mean, it just boggles the mind. But the thing that concerns me here, Laith, is that they know perfectly well that the resistance is not going to disarm. They understand that. So I'm afraid that what they're doing, these Arab autocracies and these Western governments, is that they're effectively setting the stage for Israel to continue the genocide. Because on the one hand, they're saying, okay, we'll support the Palestinian state, but the Palestinians have to give up their arms. They have to, the Hamas, other resistance groups presumably are included in this, must surrender. They know they're not going to do that. And so then if Israel continues the killing, they'll be able to say, well, it's the fault of the resistance. This seems to me like they're rigging the game in a way that will allow Israel to continue the slaughter, which goes to precisely the way you concluded your remarks, which is that this isn't going to end ultimately because all of a sudden Western leaders grow a conscience. That's not going to happen. They don't have a conscience. There's going to have to be a total and utter defeat of one side or the other. I mean, do you think that this is what's going on, that they're setting the stage for the continuation of the slaughter, and they just want to be in a position to blame Hamas for it because it refuses to disarm?
Yeah, and look, they are definitely desperate for propaganda points. And they have, I don't think they've been able to convince anybody with this act about the two-state solution right now. But the situation, will continue. Yes, they're trying to give an excuse for the continuation of this genocide, but this genocide was going to continue with or without this excuse. And the power of the Western media and the collaborationist elite in the Arabic and Muslim world has waned drastically. Like this conference for a two-state solution, if it was convened a year and a half ago, it may have had an effect on convincing people, let's say, around the world that, we're trying to have a two-state solution, but Hamas has to surrender. But right now, we've been watching a genocide for 22, 23 months, and the situation is like the mind, human collective consciousness is saturated with this reality of the genocide. So there's anyone that has a atom of human decency watching those children in Gaza being starved to death will be so enraged that I think most human beings are right now at the cusp of carrying arms. This is part of why the elite in places like the UK and Canada and France are rushing to do this. They're scared of the possibility of an armed rebellion. And we saw indications of that with the shooting of the two Israeli embassy propagandists in Washington, D.C., and the attack on those Zionists in Colorado. And the fact that Starmer and the UK banned Palestine Action and called them a terrorist organization, this is now opening the door. If you're going to be called a terrorist, whether you are nonviolent or not, by the state, you might as well be violent. This is really what they know is happening within the collective consciousness of citizens in the West. And this public humiliation of the self by the Western leaders that are bowing down publicly and kissing the feet of Israeli and Zionist elite. And even those MAGA people, look at this. The MAGA people have been told that, let's make white America great again, okay? And that the greatness of America is by the greatness of the white America. Well, they're watching Trump telling them that Israel is greater than America. That the Prime Minister Netanyahu is the greatest leader history has known. This is from the mouth of Trump. So even the white supremacists or white nationalists are feeling less than, and their elite are telling them, you are less than Jewish Europeans. Zionists are the chosen people and you're supposed to serve them. This does not work well with anybody. So the Zionists have been massaging white nationalist and white supremacist sentiments for decades, since September 11th specifically, to direct them to hate Arabs, Muslims, and immigrants in general, and to accept Zionism as part of white supremacy. This is why we saw Tommy, whatever his name is, in the UK, and the UK nationalists carrying Israeli flags whenever they're out. This is why we saw the same happening in the United States. But now, these white nationalists are being told that they are less than by the leader of the white nationalist movement, President Trump. This is why we are beginning to see a revolt even within these white nationalist circles, led by people like Tucker Carlson and so forth, against this self-humiliation, unprecedented in human history, that a leadership of a people comes out to its own people and say, you are less than, and you are supposed to serve somebody else. We've heard many races and many leaders tell their own people that they are better than. But this is the first time in human history that this happens, and this is adding to the full collapse of Zionist influence in general.
Yeah, and I would add, you mentioned Tucker Carlson and so forth, Marjorie Taylor Greene referring to what Israel is doing to Palestinians as a genocide. One other thing I want to mention after, as you reminded me, is that Candace Owen, who's not white, she's a black woman, and amazing that a black woman, given what black women have experienced in the United States, is becoming so outspoken about Zionism and the betrayals of the Trump administration. She actually said, and I couldn't have agreed more, that if you support what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinian people, you are filth. And she kept saying it over and again, you're filth. That's correct. If you support this, you are filth. You are a Nazi. You should be marginalized. People should cross the street when they see you coming. You should be, cast into the outcast, into the netherworld of society at a bare minimum. And if you are complicit, then you should be tried in a Nuremberg style, setting, and should be given the same fate as the Nazis were in the Second World War. It's just amazing to see what's unfolding. And this is this message that Trump is giving is coming from the country that is supposed to be the most powerful country in the world. I mean, it's just mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. So, Laith, the last thing I want to ask you about, you did a wonderful report after emerging from this experience on the arrival in Lebanon of Georges Abdallah. And I watched that report, and first of all, it was just brilliant. I'm going to put a link to it in the description of the video. People, really, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. But I'd never heard Georges Abdallah speak before. And that was one of the things that was just so extraordinary about this event, his arrival at the airport in Beirut. Could you tell us a little bit about who is Georges Abdallah in terms of the resistance? How is he viewed? What role has he played? And what do you make of the message he had when he landed back on his native Lebanese soil?
Yeah, so Georges Ibrahim Abdullah, his name has all the markers there of our history in the region. George being Christian, Ibrahim being the father of monotheism, and Abdullah being. So it shows you how our societies were prior to Zionism and the curse of colonialism in the region. He was a communist, a unificationist, a liberationist. He worked with the Communist Party, the PFLP, the SSNP, the PLO, anyone and everyone that resisted Zionism, and that is something that we should all learn from. It doesn't matter what path we take if we all agree on the final goal. It doesn't matter what spring of consciousness and spring of thought will be where we start, as long as we all agree on the final destination. And that's why I personally, as you see from the content that we produce, I try to show every and all resistance groups and elevate their history and so on, even if I am not from this group, because this is the way to work collectively. And so Georges Abdallah, was an example, bright example of that. And his, conscientious resistance to the Zionist and his refusal to acknowledge that he did anything wrong by targeting Zionist officials is, again, an example of honor and steadfastness. 3 days myself in this prisons here, I couldn't imagine 41 years in such conditions. And I don't know if I would have been as steadfast as Georges Abdallah. So he's an inspiration to all of those who want to resist. That you can maintain your dignity even in captivity in the heart of the empire in Paris, in France. And his refusal to acknowledge any fault is what made Hillary Clinton intervene directly with the president of France to maintain the imprisonment of Georges Abdallah, although he had served his term, and the Supreme Court of France has ordered his release. And the American government, led by Hillary Clinton and the Zionists behind her that have tapes on her husband with children, that's for sure, have contravened the Napoleonic Code and France's supposed independent judiciary, and dictatorially kept this man for more than 20 years past his release date in these jails. So Georges Abdallah, I think, resembles the best in us all. And his arrival at the airport in Beirut and refusal to be more moderate in his speech the minute he had the ability to speak shows you how principled he is. There was a official from the Communist Party of Lebanon around him, and you could see he was uncomfortable because the Communist Party in Lebanon has become like an NGO and has kind of squandered the history of their own achievements and their struggle and sacrifices. But Georges Abdallah immediately criticized the inaction of the Arab masses. He said, "I'm not talking about the rebels. I'm talking about the masses that could do like the millions in Egypt. That 1 million of them could walk to Gaza, and the end of the genocide will happen." He's, there's some parts that we didn't translate there, but he spoke about how mere kilometers away is the holy city of Mecca, where millions of Muslims pray to silently as the genocide is happening. And so his words have made a lot of people uncomfortable in the leadership of countries like Egypt and Saudi. It also, I think, has now, we could see the reaction of the masses in the Arabic world. Now that there is a strong voice with leadership because of his history. He doesn't belong to any party. No one can control his voice. And he comes out and gives an inspiration to the Arabic masses. And we have seen since then reactions of the Egyptian populace online. Hopefully it will move from online to the reality. But a lot of Egyptians have felt those words and are ashamed of themselves not being able to act since the beginning of this genocide.
2 days after this extraordinary speech at the airport in Beirut, I searched online for one corporate media report in the West about his arrival in Beirut, and I found nothing. But if they're reacting online, Egyptian activists, and it sounds like his message was heard by at least some people within Egypt. So that's certainly encouraging. I have to say, before we close it out, Laith, that I fear for Georges Abdallah's life. As we've seen, even Syed Hassan Nasrallah was not invulnerable to assassination. And as you said, George doesn't have a massive armed organization to protect him. So I can only say that this is a person of absolutely stunning courage and integrity. And let us hope that he lives long enough to see the liberation of Palestine.
I wish for his safety. And I just want to say that anyone and everyone that takes a liberationist position on Palestine could be martyred. This is not a joke. I'm not saying it to exaggerate the danger that we face, but anyone that wants to stand for the liberation of Palestine must understand the cost that could come, that could be as high as martyrdom, right? And if you make that choice with this understanding, your actions will be guided in a better way. Going into supporting Palestine and not understanding the possibility of price that you're going to pay will make you take a lot of stupid decisions or make efforts that are not going to fruit, waste your time on efforts that are not going to fruit. So people must understand this, especially if you are on the front lines, countries like here, like in Lebanon. Our brothers and sisters in the imperialist domains, your life, maybe you're not going to get killed, not going to get martyred, but everything below that could happen to you, whether it's detainment, destruction of your career, targeting of your family, doxing of your life. All of those are costs that you must calculate, not because to scare you. These are costs that you need to calculate so you can take decisions and actions that are worth that risk. You shouldn't be ending up in jail just because he said something. Okay? You should understand that if you're going to go to jail anyways, you might as well have done something that will have a much worthy effect and price for that jail time.
You're here. And with that, I want to thank you very much for joining us today, Laith, and welcome back. And we look forward to our next conversation, brother.
See you soon, Dimitri.
We're signing off from Greece and Beirut, Lebanon on August 1st, 2025.